Are you looking to improve your sales without resorting to pushy tactics? Welcome to Sales Made Easy, the podcast that helps you to achieve better sales results and gain long lasting clients through relational selling. Let's get right into it. We have with us, ladies and gentlemen, the world renowned author of Selling from the Heart and Selling in a Post Trust World, Larry Levine. Welcome. What is a good
Hello.
word, Larry?
Hey, first of all, Harry, it's so good to see you. Like I said, right before we started this, I said, I haven't slept for days, right? I'm past the holiday joyful time. I've been so nervous because I get to hang out with
Mm,
the
yes.
legend, Mr. Harry Spate.
All right. Flattery will get you everywhere. Let me get your address so I can start sending checks to you.
It's all good. Hey, what a journey we've been on though together, Harry. It's been quite some time.
It has been. And, for those of you who don't know, I met Larry, back before he was a world renowned author. I'm not sure what year it was. I think 2015 or 2016, once we
It
traced it
was,
back.
somewhere around, I forgot where it was at, but it was somewhere back in your stomping grounds.
Yes. Yeah. You
Yeah.
were you were at an event here in Florida. And it's funny because Larry and I connected. Larry is in the copier industry, a space which I'm very familiar with as well. And he was making these posts on LinkedIn that were absolutely ridiculous to a lot of our thinking about getting to know people, being genuine, authentic, and then this whole brand emerged of selling from the heart. So it was really out of the ordinary for what Larry was talking about. So, how did this come to be? This whole idea of selling from the heart and with authenticity and so forth, because that certainly did not come from the copier industry by nature.
Okay, Harry, I'm gonna leave what you just said and I'm not gonna touch it. So we're just gonna set what you just said aside. So we're not gonna go there. But I don't even know if you know this story or not. But well, as you all know, I came out of the copier space, so I sold copiers. I was fortunate to be business partners in a few copier dealerships here in the Los Angeles area. And after, I exited out, I had to figure out what I was going to do with myself at 50 years old. So this is 10 years ago.
Mm.
And so, Harry, you know him, my dear friend who's now my podcast partner, Daryl Amy, convinced me and says, you got to take all this goodness that how you grew your copy dealerships, you got to take this goodness and you need to bring it to the masses on how you built relationships and how you leveraged building community and how you leveraged connection to the forefront to drive revenue. And I said, yeah, right, right. I don't, come on. I've never publicly spoken. I never started a podcast, never written a book, never did anything. I sucked at being a sales manager. And now I'm like, you want me to go out and publicly start speaking and writing? And all he goes, yes, I do. So I didn't have a job, right? At 50, I didn't have a job. I go, I'm going to double down on myself and I'm going to bring this to the forefront. This is God's honest truth, Harry, and
Mm.
everyone who's watching or listening to this. And so I just started to go out and speak to, right? I just leveraged my copier technology networks and I started speaking and writing and so forth and driving a very hard message that I firmly believed in the office technology world. And I had some success because I aligned to some copier manufacturers who afforded me to be able to speak to some of their dealerships and so forth. And that's really how this whole thing launched.
Mm.
However, I'm a massive believer in this. A prophet is not welcome in their own backyard. And I soon realized that if I wanted to bring my message and grow this to where I wanted to, I had to get off it. I had to just really get out of the space
Mm.
that I raised myself in, and that being the
Mm.
copper world. No disrespect to it, none whatsoever, but I had to jump the fence. And the only way to jump the fence is I had to convince Daryl Amy, who's now is my podcast partner and partner in crime here at Selling from the Heart. I had to convince him to start a podcast with me as a way to get our voices heard outside of the office technology space. So I said one day, I was getting ready to speak at a conference. Daryl happened to be there. And I said, "Hey, Daryl, you want to start a podcast?" And he goes, "No, not really. Not even on my radar screen." And I go, "Seriously, you want to start a podcast?" I go, I really got to get out of the office technology space.
Mm,
If I can't get out of the office technology space, I'm going to go back and I'm going to find me a sales job somewhere and I'm going to hang this up.
mm.
He goes, "No, no, 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 don't do this. You've already come this far." I said, "So you want to start a podcast?" And he goes, "No. However, if I agree and I like say yes to this podcast, what would you name this podcast?" And I said, like less than 30 seconds, Harry, I said, "Selling from the Heart."
Wow.
And Daryl goes, "I'm all in." And literally the next week, we had no clue what we were doing. That was 8 years ago. We started the Selling from the Heart podcast. We had no idea what to expect other than we stayed true to who we were.
Yeah.
We drew out, stuff from our guests that nobody was drawing out. And Selling from the Heart was born because I convinced Daryl Amy to start a podcast with me. That turned into the book Selling from the Heart, which turned into a business, which has turned into something beyond my freaking wildest dreams, that I could turn a thought about a podcast, naming it Selling from the Heart, and turning it into a business that's helping sales teams and companies all across the world increase their revenue and profit by doing it the right way.
Crazy. There is so much to take from that, Larry, that story. It's funny, coming from the copier industry, sometimes people don't understand. If you're not in it, they don't understand how competitive it is. And so, what I've heard based on this similar principles about selling with a servant mindset, selling from the heart, selling from this space where we're all about the other person versus all about me and I got to close the business. And like you mentioned, commission breath over the years. How does this work actually in a hyper competitive environment? This whole idea of selling from the heart, being genuine.
Yeah, so here's what's interesting about this. Um, Harry, you know me. I'm a pretty transparent and direct guy.
Yes, I do.
And this approach is not for everybody.
Mm,
And I totally get it. There's different sales approaches out there. There's different processes out there. So be it. There's very successful companies that have been built on the transactional mindset. And I'm not here to
yeah.
cast any dark shadows or disrespect anyone. There's been a ton of it. However, if you want to create long-term sales sustainability inside your company, you got to learn how to move from a transactional mindset to a transformational mindset.
Mm,
And at Selling from the Heart, and then with my second book, Selling in a Post-Trust World, what I address and what I really zero in on are the two critical components I see. Doesn't really matter what industry y'all play in. What I hit on are the people skills and relationship building skills that I believe I've seen it. I've seen it straight across the board. This is industry agnostic. Most salespeople, in fact, most sales leaders, and for that matter, which really concerns me, vast majority of executives haven't figured out how to develop their people skills and relationship building skills to turn that into trust-based relationships that increase revenue, that increase profit, that create what I call sales sustainability.
mm,
Because so many people are focused on the short term. I
yeah,
totally get it, right?
yeah.
I got to hit my monthly plan. I got to hit my quarterly goals. I totally get it. I understand it. I've been there. But when you can bring consistency and discipline to the forefront and you can zero in and hone in and double down on people skills and relationship building skills, do this day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, quarter over quarter, year over year, you will monumentally grow your business. It goes back to, let's just look back 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the greats of the world were talking about all of this.
Right. Yeah.
And when I say the greats of the world, these are just people's books that I read that I hold in high regard. I mean, they've long like checked out of the face of this earth. Regardless whether you like these people or not, it's not the point behind this. It's the message inside their books. The likes of Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie. Those two people, I mean, I hold in high regard. I still view them as leaders, and they've long been checked off the face
Right.
of the earth.
Yeah.
They were all about people skills and relationship building skills. That has a direct tie in to revenue and profit. But when we approach our customers with a transactional mindset and it's all about me, we forget that transactional relationships and transactional speak are 100% replaceable because somebody else will craft a better transactional speak. But when you can bring transformation to the forefront and how you carry yourself, how you interact, how you get people to look at things differently, how you connect at a heart level with somebody, they will literally jump through hoops and run through a brick wall for you.
Yeah, so true. Just I love what you're talking about, that this has been around forever. I'll even go back to this has been written about by the ancients. Right? So this whole idea of serving others, that came from people long centuries and centuries ago. So that stuff works. It's right. It's human nature. And yet what you must find interesting, and because you and I think similarly in a lot of these traits that we see, is that in sales, we're always taught about what to say, even to the point where I've had conversations with people and we talk about listening, and they did not connect that listening is part of selling, that selling is when we're speaking. But a huge part of selling to me is the body language, the emotional intelligence, the listening, the nodding like you're doing.
Yeah.
Like all of these little things that most people are not even remotely talking about in their weekly sales meetings. It is all about, well, someone says this is what you need to say. So talk to me a little bit about that. What's your feeling about what I just said, and what additional thoughts might you have?
No, conversation's not like a tennis match, right? It's just not where you're lobbing balls over the net or ping pong or anything like that. But you bring up listening is just so interesting around this whole thing. The whole concept is how many people are truly, truly listening? They're listening to respond. They're not listening to learn. And there's just one word to really throw in this whole listening thing is being present. And then when I think of all of this, I think of trust. It's hard to build trust in a world full of skepticism, especially in a sales world where people don't trust you. You're viewed through a non-credible set of lens, which is unfortunate, which means there's opportunity out there to raise the bar. But if salespeople, if you simply were present, and then here's the kicker, let the conversation go where the conversation goes. Most salespeople are conversationally incompetent. Hear me out on that. Most salespeople, because they're not being coached this, are conversationally incompetent. They don't know how to have a business conversation with somebody. They're so attached, right? I go back to a near and dear friend of mine by the name of Scott Schilling,
Mm-hmm.
one of the greatest connectors I know. He's out of Dallas, Texas. He wrote a really great book called That Sucks, What Now? Great book, great title, great
Yeah.
book, great guy. And he says this, and I think it points to where you're going with what you had said. He said, most people, in fact, he even said most salespeople, because this is really sales centric. He says, most people, most salespeople walk into a conversation with this. Hear me out on this, everyone. High intention, high attachment. What he would like to see more people do and more salespeople do is walk into every conversation with high intention, low attachment. It's hard because most salespeople are deeply connected. Right? Because it's poor sales funnel, they don't have enough working. So they walk into every conversation with the utmost of intention, but they're connected to the outcome. And when they're deeply connected to the outcome is when bad things happen. Bad things happen, meaning they start spewing commission breath, and it shows in their body language, and it shows in their tonality, and it shows in the manipulative questions they ask. But if you can walk in with a servant's heart, which is high intention, detach from the outcome, become a tour guide, watch what starts to happen.
Mm. All right. So this is so great. The idea of being attached, right? It's not being attached to the person. It's being attached to what you want to happen in that conversation. You want that sale to move forward. And what happens frequently is people go in and they say, well, I'm going to have a nice conversation with Larry. He's my ideal client. He needs what I have. And then Larry shows that he's already all set, or he doesn't recognize that this is a pain in his life yet. So he's not showing a ton of interest. So now a person who is attached to the outcome of I want the sale or the sale to move forward, like you mentioned, I start to get desperate. I start
Yeah.
thinking or saying
Yeah.
things that are just they're not of a normal conversation. So I might become insulting unwittingly. I might challenge you and say, well, why do you think that way? And these are things that you just wanted to say to someone you really care about, but because you want the sale, you start going to this place that then will push people away, or you'll get pushed away by potential buyers because they see you as this commission breath individual. Do I have that right, Larry, or
Yeah,
what's your
no,
thought on that?
it's so spot on. I think it even goes deeper than this, and a lot of people may not comprehend this. That's okay. But I learned this decades ago, like decades ago. And this goes back to the discipline habits, which I speak about in the trust formula, which I think is the hardest part. The hardest part for adults is to become disciplined in what we do. Because for many, they're consistently inconsistent when it comes to any form of discipline, however y'all want to define it, because they'll soon run away from discipline than run towards discipline. But the consistency part, I want everyone to hear me out on this. And if you all can just do and I write about it in Selling from the Heart, and it'll play to this high intention, low attachment. Is if you want to have an ever flowing sales funnel, and I know y'all do, you got to build an ever flowing relationship funnel. And just for all my sales brethren that are out there, we know this. In a sales funnel, there's top of, middle of, and bottom of a sales funnel. We all know this. It's sales 101. Now I'm dating myself, Harry. However, in order to have this full funnel, you got to have a full relationship funnel. And I'm a massive believer there's top of, middle of, and bottom of a relationship funnel. One flows into another one. Just imagine a big crazy eight, right? They're always cycling in and around and all that. If I meet Harry Spate for the very first time, that's top of a relationship funnel. If I want to move that through the relationship funnel, I have to have intentional conversation with Harry to build a genuine, authentic relationship in order to move that through the funnel, which means I got to do something every single day. I got to consistently have conversations that are both business and personal conversations. This is where most salespeople struggle with. And I see it straight across the board. It doesn't matter. I see it right now. And I throw a stake in the ground on this one. I said, the reason why you so are deeply attached to every conversation is you're infrequently having these types of conversations. So the minute you walk into this meeting, first meeting with somebody, it may have been a week or two since you've had another one. Just calling it what it is.
Right.
Y'all are out of practice. You go, man, I gotta get this. I gotta get this one. If I don't get this one, I know what my funnel looks like. But if every day you can build upon your relationship funnel, which is I gotta continually connect to people, I gotta continually engage in conversation with people, then you've staged your conversations, you've staged your relationships, and you don't have to worry about being deeply attached to every single conversation.
Yeah, 100%. The my head is spinning, but I've got to go back to this just to explain how this works on the conversation. You mentioned earlier, I think it was in you said it about what we're thinking about how we're going to respond when someone's speaking, right? We're not listening to really understand. So I'm going to go back when you were early into this that discussion. My brain said, "Where are we going with this?" Then I had to check myself and said, "Just listen to the end." This what happens in sales, and I know this has happened to me only about a million times, is that the person is speaking, the potential buyer is speaking, and we're thinking, how do we tie this in to what I really want to talk about, which is the sale? That ability to check yourself when you recognize that the tendency is sort of like looking at a platter of cookies and you say, I'm going to have one, and you just can't stop eating because they're so good. Perfect analogy this time of year for me. The When this happens, we have to have the awareness, or we should work at getting that awareness and say, I'm going down a path here where I'm not really listening. I'm worried about what I'm going to say next. Is this something you've experienced, or yeah, talk to me
Well,
on that.
well, first of all, everybody does. It's called human. It's just being a human. It's simply that everyone's faced it. You faced it. I faced it. We all have to deal with it. It's understanding how to control it. And it just, I've worked really, really hard on this. And I see this, it doesn't matter if you're a young salesperson, you're kind of in the midpoint of your career, or if you're in the twilight of your career. We do not work on, at least through my lens, we don't work on the art of having a conversation with somebody. And you've heard me say this, let the conversation go where the conversation goes.
Right.
And people are going, but Larry, I got to sell something. I said, you're right. I totally get it. I totally get y'all got to, I got to grow selling from the heart. I got to sell stuff.
Right.
But I also have to shine the light on the other person, which means sometimes that conversation goes where they want to take the conversation. But you got to be business astute and smart enough to unpack that, tie this all together, and have a personal and a business conversation that ties all of this together. Thus, that's where most salespeople stink at.
Yeah. So it's this emotional intelligence, or the soft skills, because I know you talk about the soft skills, which of course are not soft as in weak. They're just soft as in not mechanical,
Well, it's just how
physical
they're
mechanical.
classified.
Right. Yeah. So, but these soft skills, like an example I might give is you're having a conversation with somebody. They want to talk about their business and you want to talk about your business, and you want to keep bringing them in. To our tendency is we want to keep bringing them back to why we're there. But what happens when you let the person speak what's on their mind and you're there now focused on helping them or just listening to what their challenges are? Does that really extend the sales cycle? Is what my question is. I don't think it does. I just think it's another few minutes of building trust, which will help ultimately shorten the sales cycle if you have that trust. Thoughts on that?
No, it actually speeds it up. It doesn't
Yeah.
slow it down. Because here's what I want people to think about. That very first conversation you have with somebody, Whether that be face to face, whether that be phone, whether that be virtual, it really doesn't matter. It all plays out the same. I'm not a psychologist on this by no means, not even a doctor on this.
But you
But
did
this
stay at
is,
a Holiday Inn once.
yeah, exactly. But here's what's going on in somebody's head. Are they going to listen to me? What are they going to say? Are they trustworthy? Are they credible? I know this conversation is going to start like all the other conversations I've had with all the other salespeople. These are the silent things. Mark my word on it. These are the silent things that are going on in somebody's head. So you just got to be cognizant of it to change the narrative, change the paradigm of the whole conversation. Because I do know this. If I can establish any form of trust in a short period of time with that person, they're going to mentally check out. And how do I know this? A, because I've been there before. And most salespeople have been in this situation where you get a buyer. We'll just keep it simple. We'll call them buyers,
Yep.
where a buyer is nodding their head like Harry Spates nodding his head. That person may be there, but they're not really there. And then they politely at the end of the conversation go, you know what? Hey, let's just revisit this in about a month or so. And you think you got a live one, right? You go back and you tell your manager, man, I had a great conversation with Harry Spate. What's the next step? Well, the next step is we're going to reconvene in about a month, which the month never comes because then you get ghosted in all of this.
Right.
I gotta share this story because I walk through it. So I do a lot of work in the food services industry. Just happens to be one of the channels I love hanging out in the hospitality industry. I had this division president, first meeting, very first meeting. Guy says, I'll give you 30 minutes. Division president, can consider division president like the CEO, operating company. I'll give you 30 minutes. And in the first, I open up my conversations the exact same way. Harry, I'm super grateful for our time together this morning. I was really looking forward to this. Thank you. I appreciate you. Person's eyes got like that big. And then he goes, I've been looking forward to this as well. And then this is what he said. He goes, so tell me a little bit about yourself. There's a point behind this, salespeople. Hear me out on this because I know this has happened to everybody. Is you're in that meeting, first time, you have a couple pleasantries, short, 30 seconds of pleasantries. And then that buyer says, Harry, I'm interested. Tell me a little bit more about you and your company, you and your right, whatever you do. And how many salespeople go into pitch mode?
There we go.
It happens. It happens all the time. And all my response was to this person is I'll share a little bit about me and my company and why I'm here in a moment. But more importantly, insert name. What's your backstory? How'd you get to where you're at? I'm
Oh my God.
curious.
Whoa.
Upon which I never said a word for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Not one word. By the way, this guy says, I only got 30 minutes. That first call was an hour and a half, people. An hour
Oh,
and a half.
yeah.
And I probably, in that hour and a half, I probably said stuff that equated to about 10 or 15 minutes
Yeah.
because I shine the light on them. I flip the script. See, salespeople, we got to be smart. This goes back to people skills and relationship building skills is you got to be cognizant and you got to be patient because buyers are smart. Executives are smart. They've been there, done that, seen that a million freaking times, 10 times over on a Sunday. But what would it be like if you got, I just want y'all to think through this for a moment. This is the high intention, low attachment.
Right.
What would it be like if on your next call, when you're faced with, hey, I've been looking forward to this conversation, Harry. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do in your company? What happens if you just paused a moment, Said, you know what? In due time, I will get there. But more importantly, I'm more curious. Walk me through your backstory and how you landed in this company in the position you're at. Would you mind sharing that with me?
Larry, this is so great. All right, so you've heard, I mean, just from the very beginning, some people don't want to thank people for the meeting. Have you heard this?
Oh, 100% of the time. I've been slammed socially for this.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So you and I are on the same page there because I do the same thing and I see there's tons. It's just showing this whole thing about appreciation where people are taking time out of their day. They saw something in you. Why wouldn't we thank them for that? Is my thing. But anyway, I just had to ask you to see if you feel the same, get the same backlash that I do on that, which apparently is true. And
Yeah,
then
so
the
no, but
yeah.
Harry, you got to think about that. I want everyone to think about this for a moment. Just hear me out. You may not have to agree with me, but just hear me out on this. This is the part about being human that I don't think people get. Is if you want somebody to open up, you got to make them feel comfortable about you. People, they already know you're in sales. They already know why you set up the meeting. Funnel that off to the side. They already know all that. They're expecting the sales shenanigans happening right away because they go, man, I know I set up this appointment with Harry. Harry, I'm just using you as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I know I set up this meeting with Harry Spate. I know it's going to open up the same way the last freaking 10 calls I've been on all of open up. I know it's going to go down that road and I'm going to have to block it. I'm going to have to say something. I'm going to have to end these meetings like I always end these meetings. The reason why there's a closing problem is there's an opening problem.
Right.
And if you want to sell from the heart, or if you want to sell with dignity that Harry speaks so eloquently about, if you want to unpack this, then make somebody feel comfortable, connect at their heart level, and they will open up. Nothing, nothing oozes professionalism than looking somebody in the eye and sharing their name and saying, you know what, Jane, thank you. I'm super grateful for our time together this morning. I remember when we had this conversation weeks ago and we agreed to calendar it. I've been looking forward to this. I'm pumped up. Hey, by the way, Jane, tell me something good. What's been going on?
Mm-hmm.
uh, it changes the whole dynamics of the conversation.
Yeah. There the perception that people have getting into a sales meeting, like you mentioned, is you're like everyone else. Fair or unfair, that's the reality. So when we play along like everyone else, we're everyone else. And us saying, well, I'm different, does not cut the mustard at all. There is no saying I'm different. You really have to show that you're different. And Larry, you know, you're like the master, in my opinion, of asking questions that get people speaking. I mean, early on in our conversations, I hired Larry years and years ago. I think maybe before he was really established as a business, because I wanted him to speak to our sales team. But Larry's questions, the way he opened up conversations and dug deeper, were masterful. And I was like, man, my questions are very shallow. They're superficial. They're just on the surface. They're not getting any depth to them. I got to ask, how did you develop this skill of asking these questions, get people thinking, and really, it's such a great art.
No, well, thanks for asking, but I'm a high clarity guy, Harry. If y'all haven't figured it out, I love asking questions.
Mm,
I need clarity. And so it was interesting. This was a this happened to me probably 2, 3 years ago. We formed a strategic alliance and a partnership with the Y Institute. And the Y Institute was founded by a guy by the name of Dr. Gary Sanchez. And since he's been on our podcast, and I've become friends with a guy by the name of Dan Dominguez. And Harry, you might know Dan Dominguez. You might even be connected to him. Um, but Dr. Gary Sanchez was friends with Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Start With Why. And he wanted to build something that could take somebody and unpack their why in a short period of time. So he brought this whole business plan to Simon Sinek, upon which Simon goes, Gary, run with it yourself, right? Because they were friends.
Okay.
So in the span of less than 7, 8 minutes, you can really unpack your why. By the way, it's eerie accurate.
Mm.
But I'm getting to the question you had asked me. And after I unpacked this, I found out that my why is I believe success happens when I contribute to a greater cause. And how I do this is by making things clear and understandable. Because ultimately, what I bring to the table are trust-based relationships where people can count on me. The reason why I'm bringing this up is if I go back in time like decades ago in the Copier channel, I would slow things down by asking better questions because at that point, I didn't know I was a clarity guy. It only came out a few years ago. But I just know this. If you want to achieve the results that no one's achieving, you got to be willing to do the things that no one's doing, which starts with asking the questions that no one's asking. It's hard for me as a sales professional to really understand what makes Harry tick in his business and what he wants to achieve in 1 or 2 meetings. I can't do that. The only way I can do that is by gaining clarity and asking better sets of questions that gets Harry to think about his business in a different way, and then layering and layering and layering and listening and layering and being intentional and being present, not worrying about, is this thing going to turn into a sale like most people do? But I'm a high clarity, guys. That's the backstory on this. And if you want to change the outcomes, you got to change the questions. And most salespeople are at surface level at best. They ask, it's amazing how they ask one question and they think they know how to solve world peace. Now I'm exaggerating this, but y'all know where I'm going with this. What I want to do is I want to be able to ask a question, intently listen, and then ask why. Why is that happening?
Mm-hmm.
Why? What's causing that? In addition to that, what else? Tell me more.
Larry, I'm interrupting from experience, but your question to me was, why do you think that is?
Yeah.
And I was like, God, I hate that question because then it causes one to think, right? And it's like sometimes we just don't want to make the time to think. But once you have someone that asks you a question where you have to come up with the answer, you're forced to think. It's a whole different relationship. No one else would bring up those questions.
Yeah,
Really, right?
it'd be prime example would be this. Now I'm going to make this up, but this is just to prove the point. I could say something, we can have a conversation, and all of a sudden, Harry will say, again, totally made up, folks. Harry will say, our salespeople stink at prospecting. Upon which people would pounce on that and then start talking about how they can help them overcome
Mm-hmm.
prospecting phobia or whatever. So when I hear Harry say, well, my salespeople stink at prospecting, well, why is that? Why do you think they stink at prospecting?
Mm-hmm.
Then Harry's going to say, Harry, I'm throwing you on the spot.
Yeah.
Just say something. My
I don't
salespeople
know. They
stink at
just do.
prospecting. And I say, well, why is that?
Yeah. And I would say, I don't know. They just do. That's the first answer.
Okay, so then I
Right.
would say, well, help me understand that,
Yeah.
right? They just do. What's that mean? Walk
Yeah.
me
Exactly.
through that. What's it look like?
Yeah. So then I could say, I guess they're not really, they're not in tune with people need today. They're, everyone says that prospecting is dead or cold calling is dead. And I just don't know what to believe.
I don't know. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they're thinking like that?
Well, because it's out there on social media and, they want to spend more money on advertising and hopefully people will raise their hand and show that they're interested or money spent on billboards, just broadcasting the message. And the old way of doing things with face-to-face conversations just does not seem to be appealing.
So then tell me, why do you think all of this is happening and why do you think it's a real issue? Time out, stop. But you see where we're all going.
Yeah.
But thanks for playing along. But you see where we're all going with this? We're afraid, right? How many times has salespeople said this? Hey, Harry, sorry I'm asking you all these questions. I've literally heard salespeople say, you know what? Hey, sorry I'm asking all these questions. You got nothing to freaking be sorry for.
Yeah.
Sh
Well, yeah.
when you ask questions like that, people, it shows you care. It shows you want to help. You got to be, oh, it just chaps my hide that people ask a couple surface level questions and think they understand how to solve this all, only to realize that the deal stalls because they have no clarity into what's really going on. I just encourage salespeople bring a bottle of Windex to your conversations and start cleaning them all up.
Yeah.
Ask better questions.
Get a little clarity as to the
Yeah.
why. So if you had to face Larry post sales conversation, I'm pretty sure Larry would ask, he would get into the core questions, right? The depth of why do you think the person thinks that way? Or what's caused them to feel that way? And so when you're asking these questions, and if you're coming back saying, well, I think it's because it's us thinking about it is not necessarily the answer that the buyer has. So we're trying to think and say, because we are probably assuming, because we've had conversations that others have thought this way. So we're saying, I guess it's because, but really, unless we ask the question and hear from their mouth, we're just making an assumption, which may or may not be true.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
it's no, it's so mission critical. I mean, let's just think, and maybe my clarity is just like on hyper alert, but to me, clarity is something that many people need to work on.
Mm,
Just think about this. As a sales leader, as a sales manager, if your message is wishy-washy and it's not clear, we all know what happens. As a business owner, as an executive, if you're delivering an incongruent message that's not clear, that's wishy-washy, people are not clear, they may be afraid to ask the questions.
right.
So then they just go about doing things as they think they should be done, which then later to find out that's not the way it was. If we can get crystal clear in our communication, by asking better questions, by pausing. Are we tracking together? What thoughts do you have around what I just said? How is this resonating with you? Not do you understand what I'm saying? It's are you tracking with me?
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking about right now? This is pause for a moment. As we reflect on the last 5 minutes, what comes to mind?
Right. I love it. The
Hey,
power.
conversation. I will tell you this, Harry, and everyone out there who's watching or listening to this, conversations take practice. But by doing this, you'll build your confidence. You'll gain more clarity. You'll be able to have conversations with more conviction as you're more concise.
Totally agree. The idea of letting the person finish their thoughts. So showing how that works, I have to like relax because you finish saying something, but because I know you, I
Yeah.
know you're not finished. When we're learning about we're learning, or we're having a first or second conversation with somebody, we may not know them enough to understand how they actually speak. And if they're finished when they stop for that second. So this is a missed opportunity. Like with what you're saying, is that the skills and the practice of conversation is that you can pick up by being comfortable in your skin, that when the person finishes saying something, that we can pause and relax and let there be silence for a few seconds. And if you're the type like Larry, that silence does not mean I'm finished yet with my thought. It's I'm letting it sink in with you, and then I'm going to come back with something. This has taken a while to learn with you, but it just shows that when you're trying to develop the trust, the relationship with somebody, this is what we need to do. It's a skill that we continue to work on. And I can see your eyes are moving here. So where is this all leading? What is this last statement I made got you thinking about?
I mean, this is what's just racing through my head right now. I'm an avid book reader, and there's one particular guy I just gravitate towards his books, and his guy by the name of Dr. Henry Cloud. And one of the best books I read in 2024 was his book entitled Trust. Great book. I mean, if you guys don't know who Dr. Henry Cloud is, I encourage you all just Google search Dr. Henry Cloud. He's active on LinkedIn, but he's just written just a bunch of really great books. And in his book on trust, he's got 5 pillars, 5 foundations he talks about in building trust. And what's really interesting, the whole time we've been talking about 2 of these pillars.
Okay.
And I just want to bring it to the surface, right, in the short time we got remaining. But the first pillar that he talks about is, do you see me? Do you value me?
Mm,
Are you listening to me?
mm,
How are you making me feel?
mm.
The third pillar is track record. People will form trust. Again, this isn't Larry Levine speaking. This is being paraphrased through the book Trust by Dr. Henry Cloud. Is if the first pillar is, do you see me, value me, hear me? How are you making me feel? The third is track record. And unfortunately, the track record of most salespeople through the lens of a buyer is not very positive.
Right.
So not only do we have to compete with, do you see me? How are you making me feel? You got to compete with the track record of all the other salespeople that have entered that person's space
Yep.
in the last month, quarter, year, 2 years, 3 years. That's what was racing through my head. But it's all about what we've been speaking about.
Yeah. So the track record is not good for people who are sellers in general. However, what I love about this conversation, and your career, my career over the years, and many others, I think of James Muir comes to mind, and Anthony Anarino. These people, I believe, are totally chilled, right? They're removed from the outcome, which allows you to be relaxed and to have a conversation and not feel like you're being rushed or being put in a corner, that you have to give a certain answer that's going to lead you down the seller's path to get you to say yes enough times where you're left with
Yep.
no choice, right? To
Yeah.
then to go to the next step. All of that stuff to me is manipulation. The real way of doing this, whether it be selling from the heart, selling with trust in a post-trust world, selling with dignity, it's really all about the other person. And to separate ourselves does not require a ton of effort, because it's the human nature. And if we like, I love what you're talking about, is like, what is the buyer thinking about? Does this person, do they respect me? Are they going to give me I forgot exactly what the questions were, but Colin Smith I had on a podcast is that they want to be heard, they want to be validated.
Yep.
If we can give those feelings to someone else, we don't have to say, hey, Larry, you can trust me. I'm not like anyone else. You do that through your actions of listening and using your emotional intelligence. Final thoughts, Larry. This has been a blast here.
So imagine this. I'm going to keep this really simple. Imagine, just track with me on this for a moment. Imagine at the end of a conversation you have with somebody and they say this: this is one of the best conversations I have ever had with a salesperson. Imagine that happening. By the way, this is possible. This is massively possible to do because the bar is set. Unfortunately, the bar is set really low. Change the conversation, change the questioning, you change the outcome. And at the end of that conversation, mark my word on this, they will go, you know what? I can't remember the last time I've had a conversation like this.
Right.
When you can do that, you've just raised yourself to the front of the line and you become the benchmark de facto they compare everyone to.
Amen.
That's my parting words. I'm sticking to it, Harry Spade.
Yeah, those are great parting words, Larry. Great stuff. Always want to listen to the master. I love the questions. I love the way you approach sales. Where can people find more about you and your company, and some shed some light on that?
Really simple. Just go to sellingfromtheheart.net. It's as simple as that. If you want to find out what we're up to, if you want access to the podcast and my newsletter and blogs and resources, just go to sellingfromtheheart.net. And if you want some immediate tips and tools that you can put into play, just go to your texting app on your smartphone and text the word trust, TRUST, to 21,000. Just text the word trust to 21,000 and you'll immediately get access to all kinds of goodies.
Trust to 21,000. That's pretty easy. Larry, thank you so much for joining. I don't know if there's any questions out there. I see Monique's in the room, but happy to hear of a question. And if not, it will show up on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we'll have some back and forth there as well. Hey, Monique.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
What's coming to mind for you after this?
Well, yeah, and I wanted to ask it sooner, and I know a lot about this subject, to be honest. I call myself a financial alchemist, so I deal with emotions a lot in that matter. So, but I was wondering, and also about listening. But the point is, and that's actually what I also see that a lot of entrepreneurs do. They do listen. They follow selling from the heart, but they forget to ask or make the offer. So what light can you shine on that to at one point gain the trust, but also make the sale?
Hey, you bring up a great topic, and this is the conundrum. This is the massive conundrum that high relationship sellers fall into. Is they want to be liked, they want to be friends, they want to do what's right. I all support it. But you got to have the business substance and you got to have the business smarts to be able to ask for next steps. And what I find is when people are lacking confidence in themselves, hear me out on this. and this is just from experience and seeing this straight across the board. Doesn't matter if you're a solo entrepreneur, a sales leader, salesperson, this all applies. When salespeople or individuals lack confidence in themselves and they lack believability in themselves and they lack believability in their messaging and they have low self-worth, they will struggle with what Monique just said.
Mm.
And there is nothing wrong with asking for the sale. It's how you ask for it. So I always get agreeable, actionable next steps in every single one of my conversations. Whether that be a 5-minute conversation, a 15-minute conversation, or an hour and a half conversation. And it could be said as this, as we're bringing our time together to a close, by the way, this has been a fantastic time together. I've learned these 3 things. We've discussed these 3 things. In looking at this through your lens, what's an agreeable next step here? What would you like to see happen? Plain and simple as that.
Yeah, great way to address that. Well, I ask it because a lot of women I have in my programs, they struggle with self-worth. So I'm happy that you address it because that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah, because I mean, this is why it's just the foundation of selling from the heart. You got to be able to do the inner work. The inner work you do is the hardest thing you will do. It's the most transformative that you will do.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I read this book a couple years ago. In fact, it's to my left here on my desk. It's called The Business of Honor.
Mm.
And inside, it's a very spiritual based book, but they also slam salespeople in it, which is totally hilarious.
Okay.
But what was interesting about it, by the way, we're all in sales, whether you want to believe it or not,
True.
is they were saying that people struggle with healthy, assertive business conversation.
True.
And the reason why they struggle with it goes back to confidence, belief, and low self-worth. However, if we flip this all around and you work on those, what an executive, now I'm speaking through a sales lens for a second on this. But what a business executive, what an owner, a CEO is looking for, if they're going to hitch their wagon to somebody, they want to hitch their wagon to somebody who's confident, who's got high levels of belief, and's got high levels of self-worth. If you're timid, not confident, you lack believability in your conversations, you go, but, all of that filler words. They pick up on all of this stuff.
Yeah,
but if you can be confident and direct, deliver that message with conciseness, watch what starts to happen. But it requires practice, requires work, requires discipline, stuff that people aren't willing to do because it's hard work.
I know. Yeah,
Monique,
absolutely.
Yeah. If I could just add, like, you're in a perfect position to help the people you're coaching is to role play this. I mean, Larry and I both come from an industry where we did a ton of role playing and getting the muscle memory. So instead of waiting for that first conversation or for the conversation to say something for the first time, it's now said 20 or 30 times. So if you can take what Larry's saying,
advice. I love that.
Yeah. So if you take what Larry's saying, and now you say, okay, so we're going to practice. We're intimidated by asking for the order. We're intimidated by asking for the next step. Today and this month, we are going to be great at getting that next step mapped out in the calendar so everyone's comfortable. And then just take it from there. But that's really the thing that's missing because we're afraid to try it the first time. It never gets tried in a live person.
True. Yeah. And doing it with your coach, it gives you more confidence to do it the next time and the next time and the next time.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. Wow. That's why I'm here.
Well, thank you for hanging out with us on a Friday.
Yeah, of course.
Morning.
Yeah. Well, I was working, but I was listening, so I couldn't be very present. But I was picking everything up. So thank you guys for
Well,
broadcasting.
Hey, Monique, just send the invoice to Harry. He pays on time.
Okay.
It's been great. Thanks for joining us, Monique.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right, take care.
Okay, Larry. Great stuff.
All right, Bye-bye. Take care, Harry.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
We'll see you guys.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to Sales Made Easy. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Also, you're invited to join the Facebook group Sales Training Selling with Dignity. Serve first, the selling will follow.